I'm back. Mr. Clark's back. Time to take a look at topic 12.7, the radical stage of the French Revolution. All right, let's take a look here at the objectives for this particular section. We're going to take a look at why the French Revolution entered a more radical phase. We'll try and get an understanding as to how radicals abolished the French monarchy. Certainly not an easy task. Look at the causes and the course that the Reign of Terror took France. We'll describe France under the Directory. We'll take a look at how the French Revolution changed life in France. Okay, question one, why did European monarchs during the French Revolution fear the French plague? So when you think about other European monarchs in other countries in bordering or neighboring countries throughout Europe, they kind of saw what was going on in France, kind of a movement against a long-standing monarchy that had dominated French society for such a long period of time that they thought if France fell and the monarchy was ousted in France, then they too could be a target of their own citizens. Two, who were the emigres? They were French nobility, clergy, and others who fled France during the Revolution, hence the name emigres. When you look there, these are people who were during the Great Fear, which we had looked at previously. The Great Fear is the idea that the revolution could come to the front doors and the backyards of the French nobility, the really wealthy within society. So they had the financial means to get out of the country, and many of them did. Three, what did the Declaration of Pillnitz do? In this declaration, the King of Prussia and the Emperor of Austria threatened to intervene to protect the French monarchy from the revolutionaries. Keep in mind that during this period of time, there was a lot of relationships between one monarchy and the other. Often monarchies had cousins or sisters, a princess, an empress, who might marry into another royal family, further extending the control throughout Europe and around the world in terms of monarchies' influence in different countries. They kind of looked at this in some ways as a collective threat. Four, who are the sans-culottes? These are a group of working class men and women who demanded the formation of a new French republic. They wanted to take a more radical approach towards the revolution. You can see a little visual of the sans-culottes on the left here. This is a traditional French upper middle class citizen, or the bourgeoisie. Five, who were the Jacobins? They were mostly the middle class lawyers, your intellectuals, your Enlightenment thinkers. They would develop into some of the leading radicals during the French Revolution. You can see some visuals here. Kind of a drawing here. Kind of the meeting house where they gathered to discuss the issues of the time. They originally started the Jacobins as a debating society, debating the latest issues of the time. Membership was mostly of middle class men. It included a series of Jacobin clubs across France. Six, part of the political philosophy that Jacobins throw the revolution into a new phase. Jacobins were radical. They pushed for more reasonable reforms. Radicals gained control in the legislative assembly and eventually declared war on Austria, Prussia, Britain, and other states. Fighting lasted from 1792 on and off for nearly 25 years. Kind of a non-stop conflict, often pitting ideas and ideals against each other, not just physically fighting each other. They had different goals for society. 8. What happened on August 10th, 1792? A crowd of Parisians, meaning people from Paris, stormed the royal palace, slaughtering the king's guards. The royal family snuck out basically the back door and tried to flee. They were eventually captured, imprisoned, and later on we'll see beheaded. 9. What actions did a new legislative body, the National Convention, take in 1792? Well, they made some declarations, including a call for all male suffrage. They wanted to abolish the monarchy and establish a republic. They wanted to remove all traces of the old order, kind of start fresh. Louis XVI, the king, he was tried for treason against French society. He was convicted and sentenced to death. And the French execution system during this period of time of the French Revolutionary War would be the guillotine, chopped off his head. Explain the meaning of the excerpt below from a statement by King Louis XVI just prior to his execution. King Louis XVI, in what amounted to be some of his final words: Frenchman, I die innocent. I pardon the authors of my death. I pray God that the blood that's about to be spilt, will never fall upon the head of France. So Louis did not accept any responsibility for the revolution, but said he forgave the executioners and hoped that France would not be ruined by the revolution. This showed even down to the very end he had a deep love for France, even though he may not have treated his people as compassionately as many would have hoped. Shortly thereafter, his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette, she was executed as well. The Queen, of course, is famous for her statements in regard to the French citizens. Allegedly, she had told them that they should eat cake. That turned out to be a false statement, kind of just attributed to her to kind of drum up support against the monarchy. 12. How was France threatened on multiple fronts by early 1793? France was at war with much of Europe, including Great Britain, the Netherlands, Spain, and Prussia. In the Vendée region of France, there was a rebellion against the government. The sans-culottes were demanding relief from food shortages and inflation. The convention itself was divided between the Jacobins and the Girondins. Why was the Committee on Public Safety created? So this is during what is remembered as the Reign of Terror. The Committee on Public Safety was to deal with all threats within society. And what they did during this period of time, the radicals, they began to drum up accusations. A lot of times when things get out of control throughout history, sometimes people begin to take dramatic steps or actions. In this case here, this committee was basically sentencing people to death. Who rose to power as the leader of the Committee of Public Safety? Maximilien Robespierre, a Jacobin, named himself, self-named the Incorruptible, for his dedication to the revolution. He wanted to crush, as we see in 15, all opposition to the revolution, which led to the Reign of Terror. There's a drawing there of painting there of the image of Robespierre. The secret of freedom lies in educating people, whereas the secret of tyranny is in keeping them ignorant. Kind of an interesting quote there. Another quote here from Robespierre. He said, the first maxim of politics ought to be to lead the people by means of reason and the enemies of the people by terror. The basis of popular government in a time of peace is virtue. The basis of popular government in a time of revolution is both virtue, and, wait for it, terror. He was advocating violence, oppression, any means necessary. Almost, you remember back to earlier in the year when we looked at Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince, where the end justifies the means in politics. That was very much a Robespierre belief as well. He shared the sentiments from The Prince. So the end result's all that mattered to Robespierre, which would be, he himself staying in power and controlling and dominating French society. How many people were arrested and executed during the Reign of Terror? Over 300,000 people were arrested. Some 17,000 citizens were executed through the blade of the guillotine. We can see this here a little bit. Basically, they tie your hands behind your back. They slide you in. The blade is up top here. You drop the blade, and it's a sharp blade. It would cut through your head instantaneously, and you would literally be beheaded. Beheaded. Your head would be removed. Sad but true. Now, Robespierre, he became a little bit out of control, needless to say. And as he got out of control, he began to accuse some of his top allies and friends of being disloyal. During this period of time, many people living throughout French society, they feared the knock at the door. They feared that somebody would just show up randomly, accuse them of being disloyal, and they would end up being sentenced to death. It didn't really take much more than a rumor or an accusation for you to lose your head. So once he began accusing his top lieutenants, his top advisors of being disloyal as well, that's when people knew that he had snapped. After a year of constant bloodshed, the convention turned on the Committee on Public Safety and Robespierre. Robespierre was captured, executed, meeting the same fate that he had sentenced thousands to. Okay, moving on. What was the third stage of the French Revolution? This is when middle class and professionals began to dominate this phase. It created another new constitution, the third since 1789, basically a philosophy of try, and try again until you get everything correct. 20, what was the main impact of the Constitution of 1795? Well, under the Constitution of 1795, moderates took over the government. They established a new 5-man directorate, which was dictatorial and weak. Leadership by this group led to yet another change in government. The directory ruled from 1795 to 1799. You can see all the different types of government that they had. So if we start at the bottom there, you can even go further down the bottom. You can go the old regime under the king. So we're looking at revolutionary changes. We have the Committee on Public Safety. We have the 5-person directory. Then we would have in 1799 the 3 consuls. And you have 3 consuls and 1 for life. And then this would lead to the new emperor, who would be Napoleon Bonaparte. In what ways did the French Revolution change France? It overthrew the old social order. It abolished the monarchy. It brought the church under state control. 22, how did nationalism impact France? Well, anytime you see nationalism, it's usually something that brings the nation together, creates a sense of national pride. Songs, parades, and French traditions sort of came out of this spirit of nationalism. Eventually, the Bastille Day, July 14th, 1789, will be the Independence Day and a unifying date for all French citizens. '23, explain why during the Revolution the French wore practical clothes as opposed to elaborate fashions that many had worn during pre-revolutionary times. By wearing simple clothes, the French symbolized the old social order in which the aristocracy wore elaborate dress and powder wigs. This period of time is now over. '24, we're going to compare the American and French revolutions. When you look at the American Revolution, the colonists declared themselves free and independent, but the British monarchy still remained in place. The French, however, they overthrew the monarchy, completely changing their government. In France, decades of class division were one of the major reasons for the revolution. The class divisions were not an issue during the American Revolution, which was based more on the abuses of the British monarchy and the desire for self-rule. '25 had an American France react differently to the role of religion in their state. In France, the revolutionaries put the French Catholic Church under state control and took away their land. There was a lot of resentment towards members of the First Estate. In America, leaders ensured freedom of religion and outlawed the government establishment of a national church. Lesson reflection: how did the French Revolution illustrate the significance of the Enlightenment? A good way to look at it is without Enlightenment ideas, French citizens may not have challenged the long-standing status quo of the old regime, King Louis XVI, and the monarchy in France. That'll wrap it up for us here with 12.7 and the different stages of the French Revolutionary War. Until next time, Mr. Clark is